I still remember the road that night, even though I've tried to forget it more times than I can count. It was one of those endless highways that seems to stretch too far into silence, where the headlights don't really reveal anything, just push the darkness a little further back. My phone had lost signal hours ago. The fuel gauge was sitting too low to ignore, but there were no towns, no signs, no lights, just trees leaning inward like they were watching me pass. That's when I saw it. A small roadside inn, sitting alone beyond the shoulder of the road, as if it had always been there, waiting for someone like me to finally notice it. The sign flickered softly, buzzing with a tired yellow glow that made the rain look like falling ash. I don't remember deciding to stop. It felt more like the car slowed down on its own. Inside, everything was too warm, too quiet. The kind of quiet that presses against your ears until you start hearing things that shouldn't exist. Soft breathing behind doors. Footsteps that never arrive. Whispers that fade when you turn your head. And the clerk, he never looked at me directly. He just slid the key across the counter and said, almost gently, "You're in room 7. Try not to open the door after midnight." That's when I realized every mirror in the lobby was already slightly fogged from the inside. And I never should have turned down that hallway. The road had no name anymore. Just a thin strip of cracked asphalt cutting through endless dark trees, wet with cold mist and quiet rain. The headlights faded into fog that felt thick enough to touch, like damp cloth pressed against glass. Everything outside the car looked swallowed. No signs, no lights, only the slow movement of branches bending in silence. I don't remember when I started slowing down, only that the engine felt heavier, like it was resisting something ahead, and then it appeared. A building, standing alone where nothing had been before. And then, it didn't feel built. It felt placed, like someone had set it down carefully in the middle of nowhere and walked away without looking back. Warm yellow light spilled from its windows, soft and tired against the rain. The glow made the fog shimmer, like floating dust. My tires crunched on gravel. I don't remember seeing. The road behind me was already fading, as if it never existed properly. The inn door creaked open before I reached it. Not wide, not welcoming, just enough. Inside, the air changed. Warmth pressed against my skin, heavy and still, carrying the smell of old wood and damp fabric. The lobby was too quiet. Not empty quiet, but controlled quiet, like even silence was being watched. A desk stood under a flickering light. Behind it, a man waited. He didn't look up when I entered, only slid a key forward across the wood. Room 7. His voice came slowly, like it had to travel through something thick before reaching me. "You made it." Not a question, not surprise, just confirmation. My fingers touched the key. It was warm, too warm, like it had been held recently. I turned slightly. That's when I saw the hallway. Doors lined both sides. Old wood, slightly damp, each one marked with name. My name. Every door had it. Different rooms. Same name. Written like it belonged there already. A faint sound moved through the walls. Not footsteps exactly. More like someone copying movement from the other side. I shifted my hand. A pause. From the wall, something shifted too. Exactly the same timing. Exactly the same motion. The inn was listening back. I stepped toward the hallway, slow enough to hear the carpet breathe beneath my shoes. Each step sank slightly, like the floor remembered pressure. The lights flickered once. And for a moment, everything went still. No hum, no rain, no air. Just a blank, suspended silence that felt too complete to be natural. Then the lights returned, and something had changed. One of the names on the door had been rewritten, not replaced, not erased, corrected, as if it had been wrong before I even noticed it. A distant creak moved through the ceiling above me, slow, measured, like someone pacing without urgency. I looked up. The ceiling was too dark to understand, but I felt it, something walking in rhythm with me. Even when I stopped, especially when I stopped, the man at the desk still hadn't moved, still hadn't looked at me, but the reflection behind him on the glass panel didn't match his posture anymore. It was slightly off, delayed, watching me instead of him. My fingers tightened around the key. Room 7 felt further down the hall now. Even though I hadn't walked far, The distance didn't stay fixed. It shifted when I wasn't paying attention. The walls seemed closer too, not moving physically, but aware of proximity. A soft sound came from inside them. Breathing. Not mine. I reached room 7. The door already knew my hand before I touched it. It opened without resistance. Inside was simple. Too simple. Bed, chair, lamp, window, all arranged like someone had studied what comfort should look like, but never experienced it. The lamp flickered once as I entered, then held steady. The window showed the same hallway behind me, but wrong. Empty. Longer. Still watching. I stepped closer. My reflection in the glass didn't move at the same time. It waited a fraction longer, then followed. Outside the room, something shifted again in the walls. Closer this time, like the inn had leaned in. The key in my hand grew colder, then warmer again, as if it couldn't decide what it was supposed to be. And somewhere beyond the door, the hallway repeated my last movement perfectly, even though I hadn't done it again. Room 7 closed behind me with a soft click that felt heavier than it should have. Not locked, not sealed, just concluded. The air inside was warmer than the hallway, but it didn't feel comforting. It felt stored, like it had been waiting without moving. The lamp on the table flickered once, then steadied. Dust drifted through the light in slow circles, like it was unsure which direction time was flowing. I turned toward the window and paused. The hallway outside wasn't the same one I had just walked through. It looked similar, but stretched, slightly bent at the edges. Doors that should have been behind me were now ahead. My reflection stood in the glass. 1 second late. It blinked after I did. Not before. Not with me. A soft knock came from the mirror. Not the door. The mirror. 3 slow taps, like fingernails testing the inside of glass. I stepped back without thinking. The room answered with silence, so complete it felt intentional. Then the knock came again. Closer. My breath slowed. The air seemed to thicken around each inhale, like the room was measuring it. The lamp flickered. Just once. When the light returned, the hallway and the window had changed again. Longer. Dimmer. Closer than it should have been. A shadow stood at the far end. Still, not fully shaped, but breathing in rhythm with me. I didn't move. It didn't move either. Then the lights flickered again, and everything reset. The shadow was gone. The hallway returned to its first version. Even the dust seemed to forget its direction. My heartbeat stayed the same, but the room felt like it had forgotten its previous state, like it was pretending nothing had changed. I took 1 step forward. The floor answered with a faint creak. From the walls, something creaked back. Exactly the same tone. Exactly the same timing. Not imitation anymore. Synchronization. I moved my hand slowly toward the door behind me. The room paused, then responded by shifting the hallway outside the window slightly closer, as if discouraging the idea. A second knock came from the mirror, this time softer, almost patient. I turned toward it. My reflection was already facing me, even though I wasn't fully turned yet. It raised its hand. I didn't. It stopped, then smiled slightly. Not friendly, not hostile, just correct. The lamp flickered again. The reflection didn't flicker with it. Instead, it continued uninterrupted, moving a fraction too smooth, like it had learned how motion should look, but not how it should feel. Behind me, the hallway outside the door changed again. The exit sign that had been there before was gone. In its place, another door, with my name on it. The same name. Again, the mirror knocked once more. This time, I didn't hear a sound. I felt in my ribs a deep vibration, like something inside the glass was testing the distance between us. The lights flickered again, and this time, nothing reset. The shadow returned, closer than before, standing where the hallway bent unnaturally inward. Its posture matched mine exactly, even the smallest shift of balance, but slightly delayed, like it was remembering me 1 second too late. I stepped backward. The shadow stepped backward too, but only after I did. The mirror tapped again, one final time, and my reflection leaned closer to the glass. Too close. close enough that the surface seemed thinner than before, like it wasn't a barrier anymore. Just timing. The room's air grew heavier. Not colder, not warmer, just aware. The door behind me remained unchanged, but I knew it wasn't an exit anymore. It was part of the loop. The lights dimmed slowly, not flickering this time, just fading as if someone was lowering the world's attention. The shadow in the hallway stopped moving. So did everything, except the mirror. It stayed awake, watching, waiting for me to move first, so it could remember what I did after. The morning in the end didn't arrive like morning. It arrived like a correction. Light seeped into the lobby without warmth, washing over old wood and still air that felt too carefully arranged to be accidental. The clerk stood behind the counter, exactly where he had been before, or maybe where he always was. His posture hadn't changed, not even slightly. I placed the key on the counter. He looked at it before looking at me. A delay followed, a fraction of a second too long. Then he spoke. Room 7 is stable. Stable, not available, not yours. Stable. His voice carried no emotion, but it carried repetition, like it had said this sentence before and was checking if it still fit. I nodded without meaning to. The clerk mirrored the motion a beat later. Not imitation. Confirmation. Behind him, the wall clock ticked once, then hesitated, then corrected itself. I noticed something then. He wasn't blinking. Not once. His eyes stayed open with a calmness that didn't belong to tiredness or focus, more like absence of need. A guest walked past the lobby behind me, dragging luggage, slow steps. The clerk didn't acknowledge them, but the reflection in the glass did. It followed the guest until they disappeared down the hallway. Then the reflection stayed there, waiting. The clerk slid a form toward me. My name was already written at the top. Not printed, not typed, written, in ink that looked slightly damp, as if it had just been finished seconds before I arrived. I hadn't given it to him. He tapped the paper once. A sound like a distant door closing echoed through the inn. Somewhere above us, footsteps moved. Slow, measured, familiar. The clerk finally blinked. Once, and for a fraction of a second, his eyes were not his own. They reflected something behind me instead. I turned slightly. Nothing was there. When I looked back, he was already watching me again, as if nothing had changed, as if everything had always been this way. A faint whisper moved through the lobby. Not from him, not from me, from the walls between us. The clerk tilted his head slightly. Guests sometimes forget they have checked in. His voice paused in the middle of the sentence, then resumed like it was continuing from memory instead of speech. I asked if anyone ever leaves. He didn't answer immediately. The delay stretched, too long to be natural. Then he said, softly, "Checkout is not always observed." A flicker passed through the lights above us. In that instant, I saw the reflection behind the counter again, but the clerk wasn't in it. Only the counter remained, and something standing just out of frame, close enough to cast shape, not close enough to be seen. When the light steadied, he was there again, perfectly still, as if he had never disappeared, as if I had imagined the absence. But the paper on the counter had changed. A second line had appeared beneath my name, already filled, already finished, already final. The hallway outside room 7 did not stay the same length for long. It never announced its changes. It simply became different when I wasn't looking directly at it. At first, it felt normal. A narrow passage of worn carpet and dim wall lamps, humming softly with tired light. But the moment I stepped forward, the air shifted. Not colder, not warmer, just deeper. The far end of the hallway seemed to pull away from me. Subtle at first, like a trick of tired eyes. Then undeniable. Each step I took made it longer, not just distance. Expectation. The walls stayed still, but the space between them stretched like something breathing in slow motion. A door appeared on the left. It hadn't been there before. Its wood was darker than the rest, almost wet-looking under the light. A nameplate sat on it, blank. For now, I walked past it. Behind me, a soft sound formed, like the door exhaling after being noticed. The carpet beneath my feet shifted slightly with each step. not moving physically, but resisting, like it remembered pressure and was deciding how to respond. A whisper traveled through the hallway, not from a direction, from the space itself. I turned my head. The sound stopped. The moment I faced forward again, it returned, closer this time. The hallway had lengthened again. The exit sign that should have been visible ahead now hung further away than before, glowing faintly like a memory that refused to stay fixed. I walked faster. The hallway matched me, not in speed, in resistance, as if it knew how far I intended to go and adjusted accordingly. Another door appeared on the right. This one already had a name. My name, written neatly, as though it had always belonged there. I stopped. The silence that followed felt heavy enough to press against my chest. From behind the door, something moved. Not knocking, not scratching, just shifting weight, as if someone had turned their head to listen to me stop. The hallway lights flickered once. When they steadied, the door with my name was no longer behind me. It was ahead, closer than before. I had not seen it move, but it had changed position anyway. The hallway breathed again, longer this time, deeper, like it was enjoying the adjustment. I turned slowly. Behind me, the path I had just walked was already different. New doors lined the walls now, some open, some slightly ajar, all of them quiet, too quiet. A soft dragging sound came from somewhere ahead, then stopped, then started again behind me. I didn't turn this time. The hallway seemed to approve. The exit sign flickered. Struggling against distance it could no longer control. It felt smaller now, less like a direction, more like a suggestion. I walked again. Each step landed slightly later than expected, like the floor was deciding when I was allowed to arrive. The carpet rose faintly under my shoes, not to stop me, to acknowledge me. Another door appeared directly in front of me. No name, just open a crack. Warm air leaked from inside it, not inviting, not warning, observing. I passed it slowly. The whisper returned. Closer now, not words, just recognition. Like something inside the walls had finally matched my pattern. The hallway stretched again, and again, until the exit sign felt impossibly far away, suspended like a thought I could no longer reach fully. The walls now seemed slightly closer, not moving inward, just listening more closely. Every sound I made was repeated faintly behind me, slightly delayed, slightly wrong. Not echo, reproduction. I stopped walking. The hallway did not stop. It continued without me, extending forward, even as I stood still, as if my movement was no longer required for it to exist. A final door appeared ahead, wider than the others, heavier looking. Its surface pulsed faintly under the light. My name was carved into it this time. Not written, carved, deep enough to feel permanent. The hallway went silent, not empty silent, expectant silent. Behind me, all the doors were now closed, perfectly aligned, perfectly still, like nothing had ever been different. The air felt paused, waiting for me to decide if I still belonged to the direction I came from or the one that was now ahead. Room 9 was not on any map of the inn I had seen, yet every hallway seemed to eventually bend toward it. The door was slightly warmer than the others, not enough to be obvious at first touch, only enough to make you notice when you let go. A faint vibration lived in it, like something inside was resting too close to the surface of wood. I stood there longer than I meant to, listening, not for sound, for absence of it. Housekeeping passed behind me once, then again in a direction that didn't match their steps. Neither time did they look at room 9, as if acknowledging it would make it real in a way they could no longer manage. I finally pushed the door open. The air inside was still warm, but layered, like different temperatures had been stacked and forgotten to settle. A bed sat perfectly made, too perfectly. No wrinkles, no shift, like it had never been used, but had always been waiting. A tray of food rested on a small table, fresh or freshly replaced. It was hard to tell. The room carried a faint laughter, not loud, not joyful, more like a memory of laughter replaying itself incorrectly. It came from nowhere specific, and everywhere at once. I stepped inside. The door closed behind me without force. just decision. The handle did not click. It sighed. I turned toward the bed. The blankets shifted slightly, not from air, from attention. Something had noticed I was there. The tray on the table trembled, just once, then went still again. I walked closer. The carpet under my feet felt softer here, not comfortable, absorbing, like it remembered more footsteps than it could hold. A faint voice drifted through the room. My name, not spoken clearly, more like remembered incorrectly. I froze. The silence that followed felt tight, as if the room was holding its breath with me. The mirror on the far wall reflected the bed, but not the same way I saw it. In the reflection, someone was already sitting on it, still, waiting. I turned quickly. The bed was empty. When I looked back at the mirror, the figure remained, slightly tilted now, like it had noticed my reaction. The laughter returned, this time closer, from the hallway side of the room. But the door was still closed. I checked it. Locked. Not from my side. From both. The tray on the table shifted again. A small movement, like something had taken a bite I didn't see, then stopped. The mirror figure raised its head slowly. My movements were not mirrored correctly anymore. It was ahead of me, predicting, correcting. The room light flickered once, and in that flicker, the bed looked used. Deep impressions formed in the mattress, fresh, but already settling into permanence, as if someone had just stood up without leaving. The laughter faded into a whisper. Now it came from inside the walls, not traveling, embedded. The room felt smaller, not physically, conceptually, like space had decided there was less reason to stretch here. I stepped backward. The mirror figure did not move. It simply remained, as if waiting for me to finish the version of myself it had already started. The tray finally tipped slightly. A fork slid across it on its own, slowly, deliberately, stopping exactly where my hand had been moments earlier. The realization didn't arrive loudly. It arrived softly, like the room had whispered directly into thought instead of sound. Someone had been staying here longer than me, and they still were. The laughter stopped completely. Now there was only breathing. Not mine, not in front of me, but all around me, layered inside every corner of room 9, like it had learned the shape of the space and refused to leave it empty again. The mirror figure finally stood, slowly, too smoothly, and stepped forward, not toward me, toward the room I was standing in, as if I were the reflection now, and it was deciding whether I still belonged in the original. The rain began without warning, not above the inn, but around it, as if the storm had been drawn into a perfect circle, refusing to touch anything beyond its invisible boundary. I stood at the window of room 9, watching the glass blur with slow-moving water. Each drop slid downward like a tide, I refusing to stay open. But the sound was wrong. It wasn't falling. It was walking. Soft, synchronized steps layered into rainfall. Each impact too evenly spaced belonged to nature. I pressed closer to the glass. The surface felt colder than it should have, almost like it had been cooled from the outside. Beyond it, the inn's parking lot shimmered under rain, empty, except for movement that didn't match the wind. Shadows shifted between the trees, not running, not hiding, just repositioning, like something was checking angles. The glass fogged from the outside inward, not from breath, from presence. I wiped it once. The moment I did, new condensation formed instantly, as if the glass preferred being unreadable. A distant flicker of lightning split the sky. For a second, everything outside froze. And in that freeze, I saw it, a shape standing just beyond the edge of the rain. Still, listening, the rain returned instantly, louder this time. The footsteps in it became clearer, closer. I stepped back from the window. The room felt tighter now, as if the storm had pressed against the walls to get closer to me without entering. A soft sound came from the hallway. Not knocking, waiting. The rain outside changed rhythm. Now it matched my breathing. I stopped breathing. It did not stop. The elevator was at the end of the hall. I don't remember choosing to walk down. Its door stood open, waiting without urgency. The button panel inside was dim. Half the numbers were already gone. Only one remained. B1. I didn't press it at first. It felt unnecessary, like it already knew. The doors closed slowly behind me, not sealing me in, just accepting me. The descent began without sound. No mechanical hum. No movement sensation. Only the feeling of lowering, like the building was letting me sink through its memory. The first stop came too soon. The doors opened onto a basement corridor identical to the hotel above, but slightly older. Duster, dimmer. Lights flickered in patterns that felt like half-remembered conversations. Silhouettes stood along the walls, not facing me, not moving, just occupying space like unfinished thoughts. The doors closed again before I could fully understand them. The elevator continued downward. Again, B1, same button, still glowing. The second descent felt heavier. When the doors opened this time, the basement was different. The hallway bent at angles that shouldn't connect. Walls seemed too close together, then too far apart when not watched directly. Voices echoed softly, not speaking to each other, repeating each other, as if conversations had been trapped here and left to decay into loops. I heard my own name once, spoken like it had already been forgotten halfway through saying it. The door shut faster this time. The elevator dropped again. B1, again. The third descent felt wrong. Not downward, inward. When the doors opened, the lights were flickering so fast they became almost continuous. The silhouettes were closer now, still not looking at me, but aware I had arrived. One of them tilted slightly, as if listening through walls I could not see. A sound passed through the basement. Old laughter, distorted and stretched thin. It felt like it had been played too many times. The doors closed abruptly. The elevator did not pause. It did not rise. It simply returned. Lobby. But the lobby was wrong. The clerk was still there, but the counter was longer, and the clock behind him had gained extra hands, all pointing in different directions. He did not look up, but the reflection behind him did. Directly at me, the elevator doors stayed open longer than before, as if waiting for me to decide whether I had ever truly left it at all. The mirrors in them began to change slowly, not visibly at first, only in timing. My reflection no longer matched me immediately. It waited a fraction of a second, then followed. At first, I thought it was fatigue, a trick of tired eyes, but the delay stayed consistent, always late, never random. The mirror across the hallway showed me standing still. Even when I had already moved, I turned my head. The reflection kept looking forward. Then, slowly, it turned after me, but not correctly, like it had learned direction, not intent. A guest passed behind me. I watched their reflection first. It smiled when they did not. I turned quickly. The guest was neutral, unaware, but the mirror kept smiling, long after they left. One reflection remained behind when I walked away from it, just stayed there in the glass, standing in an empty hallway that no longer matched mine. When I came back later, it was still there, but it had shifted slightly closer to glass, like it was testing how thin the barrier had become. A faint crack appeared near the corner of one mirror, not from impact, from pressure inside. The reflection in it did not mirror me anymore. It watched me independently, and blinked when I did not. The parking lot stretched farther than it should have, even from the upper window. The distance felt uncertain. At the far edge stood a figure, still, not approaching, not retreating, just positioned where visibility begins to fail. Every window in the inn reflected him differently, sometimes closer, sometimes further, but never gone. Car alarms in the lot went off suddenly. No wind, no movement, just reaction. No one in the inn acknowledged it. Except me, the figure never moved, but his posture changed. Subtle, like remembering a new position. Every reflection showed a slightly different version of him. In one, he stood upright. In another, slightly tilted. In another, closer than physics allowed. I left the window briefly. When I returned, he was nearer, not physically, reflectively, as if glass itself had shortened the distance without informing reality. The lights in the parking lot flickered once, and in that flicker, I saw him turn his head, not toward the inn, toward me, even though I was not certain he had eyes at all. Then everything steadied, and he was still again, but no longer distant. Room 12 was not far from the others, yet it felt separated by something deeper than distance, like the hallway itself hesitated before leading me here. The door had no sound when it opened, not even a creak, just acceptance. Inside, the air felt thinner, not empty, just carefully reduced, as if the room only kept what was necessary to remain visible. A bed sat in the center, perfectly aligned with the walls. Too aligned, no trace of previous use, no wrinkles, no history, but something about it felt recently disturbed anyway. A suitcase stood near the corner, closed, unlabeled. I don't remember bringing it. The lamp on the desk flickered softly, but only when I wasn't looking directly at it. When I turned toward it, it stabilized, like it preferred being unobserved. A faint sound moved through the room, not outside, inside the surfaces, like the walls were rehearsing silence. I set my hand near the suitcase. It felt slightly warm, not heat, memory of heat. I opened it. It was empty, but the emptiness felt structured, like something had been removed, so precisely it still left an outline behind. I closed it again. The latch clicked too late, a delayed response, as if the suitcase needed time to remember being shut. The mirror above the dresser showed me standing there, but something was wrong. My reflection blinked a fraction after I did, then it stopped blinking at all. I moved slightly. The reflection hesitated, then copied me incorrectly. A small shift in posture that didn't belong to me. The air in the room tightened, not physically, attention-wise, like the space was becoming more aware of how I occupied it. A knock came from the hallway. Once. Soft. Then nothing. I waited. No second knock followed, but the silence afterward felt heavier than before, like the knock had removed something instead of adding sound. I glanced at the bed again. It looked unchanged, but I couldn't trust that anymore, because the room had started forgetting what it contained. Not all at once. Slowly, carefully, as if testing what could be removed without breaking the shape of the space. The suitcase was gone. I hadn't seen it move. It simply wasn't there anymore. I stepped closer to the bed. The mattress dipped slightly under invisible weight, then returned to normal, like something had briefly considered staying. A faint voice passed through the room, not from outside, not from inside, from the idea of the room itself. My name, but unfinished, as if it had been spoken once before and forgotten mid-pronunciation. The mirror reflected the bed again. This time, there was a shape sitting on it, still facing forward. I turned immediately. The bed was empty, but the impression on the mattress remained. Fresh, too fresh, like it had just stood up without ever arriving. The reflection did not match me anymore. It stayed behind, occupying a version of room 12 I could no longer confirm existed. The air grew quieter, not peaceful, stripped, as if the room was gradually deciding what parts of me were necessary to keep representing. The lamp flickered once, and for a brief moment, my reflection was not there. Only the room remained, waiting. When the light returned, I was back, but slightly less certain of where I was positioned within it. The door behind me clicked softly, not opening, not closing, just acknowledging that I had been accounted for. And somewhere inside the room, something began preparing to forget me again. The telephone was already ringing when I noticed it. Not loud, not urgent, just persistent enough to feel intentional. It sat on the small table near the bed in room 12, its cord coiled like it had never been used, and yet somehow still remembered. I didn't recognize it being there before, but I also couldn't remember the room without it. I lifted the receiver. Cold air slipped into my hand the moment I touched it. A faint breath came through the line. Close. Familiar. Then my own voice spoke. Not clearly at first, like it was adjusting to my shape. Don't. A pause. A delay that felt like hesitation from a version of me I didn't know existed. Answer tomorrow. The line crackled softly, like the sound of paper folding itself in the dark. I pulled the receiver slightly away. The voice continued anyway. Not louder, just closer, Caller ID blinked on the phone screen. My name, perfectly spelled. No variation. No error. The room felt smaller. Not physically. Contextually. Like it was narrow in the space where denial could exist. I asked who was calling. The response was immediate. Me. Then silence. Then breathing. My breathing. But not synchronized. Slightly ahead of mine. Like it had already practiced what I would do next. I hung up. The phone did not stop ringing. The sound moved. Not through the device anymore. Through the walls. Through the bed frame. Through the space between thoughts. Every surface in the room carried the same vibration now. I backed away slowly. The telephone remained perfectly still, except for the ringing, which had become everywhere at once. The vending machine was not supposed to be there. It stood at the end of a narrow corridor I hadn't noticed forming until I was already inside it. Its glass front glowed faintly, filled with rows of drinks that looked slightly too cold for the air around them. One light above it flickered in uneven timing, like it was counting something incorrectly. I pressed no buttons, but the machine hummed anyway. Behind it, a sound emerged, a soft metallic shift, not mechanical failure, more like relocation. The vending machine slid forward just enough to reveal something behind it, a staircase, narrow, old, lit by a single flickering bulb that seemed unsure whether it still had permission to exist. The air changed immediately, cooler, denser, like sound itself was being pulled downward. I stepped closer. The first step responded under my weight with a sound like distant applause. Not loud, just aware. Each step echoed the same response. Applause without audience. Recognition without source. The walls tightened slightly as I descended, not moving physically, just convincing me they were closer than before. A whisper followed me down, childlike, counting, but always wrong. One step behind reality, 2 steps ahead of certainty. I stopped briefly. The counting stopped too, then resumed from a different number, as if it had recalculated me. The staircase bent slightly, not geometry, expectation. The deeper I went, the more the air felt layered with unfinished exits. At the bottom, there was a door. No handle, just pressure. I pushed it open. The room beyond looked like the lobby above, but incorrectly remembered. Same layout, wrong alignment. The exit sign flickered in a language I couldn't fully interpret. When I turned to leave, the staircase behind me was gone. Only wall remained, smooth, unbroken, as if descent had never been allowed to become memory. I woke up in a different room, not unfamiliar, just rearranged. The bed was against a different wall. The window faced a corridor I didn't recognize, but the light felt the same. That was the worst part. Consistency inside inconsistency. I stepped out into the hallway. It bent slightly left where it should have gone straight, then corrected itself when I looked directly at it, like it was embarrassed to be noticed changing. Guests passed by, dragging suitcases that didn't match their steps. No one acknowledged the shift, or each other. Rooms that were once adjacent were now separated by distance that felt emotionally incorrect. Doors appeared where walls used to be. Walls appeared where memory suggested doors should exist. My key no longer matched any visible lock. Yet every door seemed to react when I passed it, like it remembered me even when I didn't recognize it. That night, I did not sleep, but the end did. I felt it, the entire structure shifting around me in slow, deliberate movements. Rooms sliding past each other like thoughts rearranging themselves in a dream that refused to wake. When morning came, nothing was where it had been, except me, still misaligned, still waiting for the building to decide where I belonged next. The curtains moved before the wind reached them, not violently, just enough to suggest awareness. The window behind them showed nothing but pale morning fog, but the movement did not come from outside. It came from inside the fabric itself. I approached slowly. The fabric shifted away from my hand slightly, like it preferred distance, then stopped. A shape formed behind it, not fully defined, just presence condensed into outline. It stood perfectly still, watching without needing eyes. The light in the room flickered once, and the shape leaned closer, not stepping, not moving, just reducing distance without changing position. The outline matched mine. Almost, but slightly wrong in proportions I couldn't identify immediately. I stepped back. It stepped back too, but delayed, like it was remembering how I moved rather than copying it. When the light went out for a second, it remained visible, not glowing, not illuminated, just present in a way light could not affect. When the light returned, it was gone, but the curtains were still moving, as if something had just stepped out of them and decided to stay nearby instead. The guest book sat on the lobby counter, like it had always been there, but I never remembered seeing anyone write in it. Its pages were thick, heavy, like they had absorbed more than ink over time. I opened it. My name was already inside, not at the top, not at the bottom, somewhere in the middle, as if it had been waiting for me to reach it naturally. The ink was still slightly wet, even though I hadn't touched it. Below my name, a line had already formed. Then another, writing itself slowly, not letters appearing, but meaning assembling. My memories began to appear on the page. Things I hadn't written, things I hadn't fully remembered, then things I hadn't experienced yet. Ink moved upward instead of down, defying the idea of conclusion. A page turned on its own. The sound was too soft to be mechanical, too intentional to be accidental. The final page was already filled. No space left blank. Only one word remained at the bottom, unfinished, waiting. And as I stared at it, I realized the writing was not recording what had happened. It was deciding what would. The room I entered did not feel empty. It felt attentive. Like silence here was not the absence of sound, but the presence of something listening carefully to what was not being said. The door closed behind me without force. Not a slam, not a click, just finality. The air inside was still but not calm. It carried a faint pressure, like thoughts had waited here and were slowly settling into the space. I stood near the center of the room, waiting for nothing in particular. But the room did not wait with me. It responded. A soft tap came from the wall. Once, then again, not random, rhythmic, like it was echoing a pattern I hadn't spoken out loud. I froze. The tapping stopped. The moment I considered moving, it resumed, matching the intention before it became action. Not reaction, anticipation. The air near my ear shifted slightly. Warm, subtle, as if something had leaned closer, without crossing distance. A thought formed in my mind, small, unspoken, before I could fully understand it. The wall answered. A single tap, exact timing, perfect recognition. My breath slowed without permission. The room did not repeat sound. It repeated understanding. I tried to think of nothing. The silence grew heavier, then heavier again, until even the absence of thought felt measurable. A faint hum traveled through the floor. Not electrical, not mechanical, more like the room adjusting itself to mental weight. I moved toward the bed. Each step was answered by a faint structural shift. With adjusting, air tightening, space recalculating. I stopped again. So, did everything else. Not delayed. Synchronized. The mirror on the wall reflected me standing still. But in the reflection, my eyes moved slightly before mine did. Not much. Just enough to feel wrong in a way I couldn't explain. A thought slipped through, unintentional. I should leave. The room responded immediately. A soft tap behind me. Then two. Then silence again, like it was considering whether the idea was acceptable. I turned slowly. The door behind me had not changed, but it felt further away than before. Not physically, relationally, as if distance depended on permission now. Another thought formed, smaller this time. I'm being heard. The walls answered with a long, single tap. Not agreement. Recognition. The lights flickered once. And in that flicker, I felt something else in the room. Not presence exactly. Awareness distributed through the space like breath inside lungs. It was not inside the room. It was the room. I stopped thinking deliberately. The silence deepened immediately. Too quickly, as if the room had been waiting for that decision. Then, for the first time, no response came. No tapping, no shift, no acknowledgement. I exhaled slowly. The silence stayed intact. For a moment, I believed I had control again. Then I noticed the mirror. My reflection was no longer still. It was thinking, not moving, thinking, eyes shifting slightly, not toward me, but toward ideas I had not yet formed. The room's silence changed texture. Less listening, more waiting. A thought surfaced without permission. What happens if I stop being predictable? The answer did not come from the walls. It came from everywhere at once. A single tap, deep, final, as if the room had already prepared for that question long before I arrived. The door behind me clicked softly, not opening, not locking, just acknowledging that I was no longer the only thing in the room aware of itself. The lights died without warning. Not a flicker, not a warning pulse, just absence. Then did not react immediately. It simply accepted darkness as a replacement condition. The hallway outside room 16 felt different the moment illumination vanished. Not darker, more structured, like the absence of light had revealed something underneath it that light had been covering all along. I stepped into the corridor slowly. My footsteps did not echo. They were absorbed. The silence was no longer empty. It was arranged. Shadows lined the walls in coordinated stillness, not random darkness, positioned darkness, as if the absence of light had its own geometry. Emergency lights blinked on above me, weak, red, unsteady. They did not illuminate the hallway evenly. Instead, they revealed fragments, pieces of space that felt disconnected from each other. A door here, a corner there, a stretch of hallway that should not have fit between them. The inn was no longer a building. It was a sequence being displayed incorrectly. A faint hum moved through the walls. Not electrical, more like restraint, as if something large was holding itself still inside the structure and the darkness had loosened its grip slightly. I walked forward. The shadows moved first, not away from me, around me, coordinating. The emergency lights flickered again. In that flicker, the hallway beyond me appeared frozen, completely still, not empty, paused, like the entire outside world had stopped responding at the same time the lights failed. When the light returned, nothing outside had changed, but everything felt further away. A door along the corridor stood slightly open. Warm light did not come from inside it. Instead, cold air came out, reversing expectation. I approached slowly. The room inside was dark, yet visible in outline. Furniture shapes stood still, but not in rest, in suspension, like they had been interrupted mid-intention. A shadow crossed the far wall, then stopped, not disappearing. Waiting, the hum deepened, then felt larger, without electricity, as if the lights had been compressing it into something more understandable. Now it expanded into something less stable. I stepped back into the hallway. The shadows did not follow immediately. They observed first, then adjusted. The emergency lights flickered again, and in that moment, I saw something impossible. The corridor behind me was no longer the same corridor I had walked through. It was slightly shifted, angles wrong, doors misaligned, distance reinterpreted. The inn was reconfiguring itself in darkness, not randomly, carefully, like it was testing new arrangements of existence. A faint sound came from somewhere above. Slow movement, measured, the same rhythm I had heard before, but now without structure contain it. The ceiling creaked softly, not collapsing. Listening, the shadows on the walls suddenly aligned toward a single point ahead, not toward me, past me. Something was arriving without movement. The emergency lights flickered one last time, and then stabilized in a dim red glow. In that glow, the hallway felt occupied in a way I could not fully see. Not by presence, by attention. And for the first time since the outage began, I was no longer the thing being watched most closely in the dark. Something else had entered the room of observation. The ice machine was at the end of a narrow service hallway I didn't remember entering. It stood alone, humming softly in a rhythm that didn't match the inn's remaining systems. Even without stable power, it continued working. That alone felt incorrect. Cold air leaked from its seams, crawling along the floor like something searching for edges. I stopped a few steps away. The machine did not change behavior. It simply continued producing ice that no one had requested. A faint crackling sound echoed inside it, not mechanical strain, more like language breaking into pieces too small to understand. I reached toward the chute. The air near it burned cold against my skin. Not temperature. Contact without permission. Inside, ice dropped slowly into the tray. Each cube was irregular, not in shape, in meaning. As I leaned closer, I noticed something inside the frost. Letters, not carved, formed, names appearing inside melting patterns that shifted too quickly to read fully. Then one stabilized. My name. I stepped back immediately. The machine hummed louder in response. Not louder in volume, louder in certainty. A whisper came from inside it, soft, repeated, not spoken, produced. The same name again, and again, each repetition closer than the last, as if the sound was moving outward through ice instead of air. The hallway around me began to feel colder, not physically, structurally, like temperature was becoming part of architecture. The ice tray filled again, faster now, too fast, each cube landing with soft precision, like punctuation in a sentence I couldn't stop reading. A faint reflection appeared on the machine's surface. Not mine, something behind me. I turned quickly. Nothing was there, but the whisper continued, now not from the machine alone, from the walls, from the floor, from the idea of cold spreading through the inn. My name repeated again, but this time it paused halfway through, like it was deciding how to finish me. The ice machine stopped suddenly. Silence returned, sharp, immediate. Then one final cube dropped, louder than the rest. It cracked as it hit the tray, and in that crack, the whisper stopped entirely, as if something had finally finished learning how to say me correctly. The window in room 16 did not face outside anymore, at least not in any way that felt consistent. It showed the lobby first, then a corridor, then something that looked like both at once, layered incorrectly. I stood close enough that my breath touched the glass. It did not fog normally. It fogged in shapes, thin outlines forming and dissolving too quickly to hold meaning. Then the image stabilized. A new view, the entrance, but wrong. The door was opening, and people were walking in, except I had not heard it happen. The figures moved slowly through the entrance, as if stepping through something thick rather than air. Guests, but unfamiliar. Not because I didn't recognize them, because they hadn't fully arrived yet. Their shapes flickered slightly at the edges, like reality was still deciding whether to commit. One of them stopped just inside the doorway, looked directly toward the window, at me, not past me, at me. Their mouth moved. No sound reached the glass, but I understood it anyway, not as words, as warning shaped like intention. Another figure followed behind them, then another, each one appearing slightly more stable than the last, as if time was learning how to hold them properly. I stepped closer. The glass felt colder than before, too cold for something inside a building. One of the arriving guests raised a hand, not waving, pointing, at something behind me. I turned quickly. The room was empty. When I looked back, the window had changed again. Now the guests were closer, too close, standing just inside the lobby, yet still not fully present. Their movements were slightly delayed, like echoes of motion rather than motion itself. A faint distortion passed through the glass. Their mouths moved again, this time slower, more deliberate, not warning now, recognition, as if they had finally seen something they were not supposed to arrive before. The glass fogged rapidly, not from heat, from pressure, from arrival becoming too dense to contain. I pressed my palm against it. The surface did not respond like glass. It responded like memory under strain. The figures behind it stopped moving. All at once. Perfect synchronization. Then every head turned slightly. Not toward each other. Toward me. The window flickered. For one instant, the lobby was empty again. Then it filled instantly with more guests than before, as if time had corrected itself by overcompensating. One figure stood closest now, their outline almost fully formed. Almost. Their mouth opened. This time, I heard nothing through sound, only meaning. You are earlier than you should be. The window darkened slightly, not like night, like recognition becoming uncertain. The figures began fading at the edges again, not leaving, undoing, as if their arrival was no longer stable. I stepped back from the glass. The room felt quieter now, not empty, rebalanced. The window remained still, but the impression of guests lingered on the surface like breath that refused to vanish completely. And somewhere beyond the glass, something waited for its correct moment to arrive again. The bell did not belong to any visible structure in the inn, yet every night it arrived precisely at midnight, not as sound entering the building, but as sound becoming the building. It rang once, then stopped, and in that single moment, everything inside the inn reacted, not visibly at first. Internally, guests paused in hallways without knowing why. Lights dimmed slightly. Shadows shifted orientation, as if acknowledging a shared instruction. I stood in room 16 when it happened again. Midnight, the bell rang. One note, pure, empty, complete. The air in the room changed immediately. Not colder, not warmer. Aligned, like the space had briefly synchronized with something outside of time. I stepped into the hallway. Everyone else was still, not frozen, waiting, their bodies slightly angled toward the lobby without intention, as if the sound had redirected attention before awareness could intervene. The second floor lights flickered faintly, not malfunctioning, responding. I walked toward the stairs. Each step felt slightly delayed, like the building was reconsidering whether I should be allowed to move during the bell's presence. Halfway down, I noticed something strange. The shadows were not following the people anymore. They were all pointing in one direction, toward the lobby, toward the source that did not exist. The bell rang again, but softer, not repetition. Continuation. I reached the lobby just as a final vibration faded. The clerk stood behind the counter, still motionless, but the reflection behind him was not still. It was watching the ceiling, as if listening for something that had not fully arrived. The guests in the lobby remained frozen in posture. None moved, but none were relaxed. All of them held the same subtle tension, like waiting for permission to resume existence. The bell did not ring a third time. Instead, something else responded to the silence it left behind. A faint pressure in the air. Not sound. Arrival. The shadows in the lobby leaned inward slightly. Not toward me, toward the center of the room. The space between everything. The clerk finally blinked. Slowly. And for the first time, his expression shifted. Not emotion. Recognition. As if he had heard the bell differently than everyone else. The lobby lights dimmed without flickering. Controlled. Intentional. As if the building was making room for something that did not yet have shape. I looked toward the entrance. The doors did not open, but something felt like it had already stepped inside anyway. Not physically, structurally. The bell never rang again that night, because whatever it called had already stopped needing the invitation to arrive. Room 17 felt normal at first. That was always the first mistake. The bed was centered. The lamp was steady. The air was still enough to feel safe in. But the clocks were wrong. Not stopped. Not broken. Wrong in motion. The wall clock ticked forward in uneven bursts, like it was deciding how much time should be allowed to pass at once. Tick, 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 silence, then 3 ticks at once. I watched it for a long time without meaning to. Time inside the room didn't feel like time outside the room. It felt negotiated. Minutes stretched too long, then collapsed too quickly, like they forgot their own shape mid-existence. I sat on the bed. The mattress responded late, as if it had to remember I was there before accepting the weight. The lamp flickered softly. When it steadied, the shadows in the room had changed position, not moved, rewritten. I stood up quickly. The motion felt delayed in my reflection. In the mirror, I was still sitting for half a second longer than I actually was. Then I wasn't. A faint pressure built in the air. Not sound, not vibration. Sequence. The room was losing agreement with itself. I stepped toward the door. It felt further away than before. Not physically. Chronologically. Like it belonged to a different moment now. Behind me, the clock ticked backward once. Just once. And the entire room shifted slightly in response. A correction. I opened the door. The hallway outside looked familiar, but the lighting was older, dimmer, like I had stepped into a version of the inn that had already finished existing once before. I walked forward. The hallway bent strangely, then corrected itself when I stopped noticing it. Time here did not move forward consistently. It breathed, and I was inside its inhale. It began with footsteps I didn't make. Not behind me, ahead, matching my pace before I even decided it. I stopped walking. The footsteps stopped too. A delay followed. Then they corrected themselves, as if learning from my hesitation. The hallway felt longer than before, not stretched, studied. A shadow appeared near the corner of the corridor, not attached to anything visible, just presence flattened into darkness. It didn't move at first. It waited, then it stepped forward when I did, not mirroring, predicting. I turned slightly. It adjusted before I finished turning, always half a moment ahead, never fully synchronized. I tried walking faster. It matched instantly, then improved, like it was refining the concept of me through repetition. The light overhead flickered once. In that flicker, the shadow stood directly beside me, but I hadn't reached that position yet. I stopped completely. It did not stop. It continued forward, then paused, realizing I had abandoned the pattern. The silence that followed felt observant, evaluating. I turned toward the exit at the end of the hallway. The shadow arrived there first, waiting, not blocking, anticipating, like it already knew whether I would leave or continue. I took a step backward. The shadow corrected itself again, as if my retreat was also part of its learning process. And that was when I understood it wasn't copying me. It was preparing to be me before I finished being myself. The door appeared when I wasn't trying to find it, at the end of a corridor that didn't exist a moment before. Plain, unmarked, except for the faint impression of attention around it, like something had been watching it for a long time without blinking. I approached slowly. The door did not react. It only waited. The hallway behind me felt less stable the longer I looked at it. So I looked away, and the door shifted slightly. Not opening, not closing, becoming more defined. I stepped closer. It remained still, but everything else became uncertain. The walls felt less confident in their shape. The lights above lost consistency, as if observation was the only thing holding them together. I turned my head away for a moment. A soft creak followed immediately. When I looked back, the door was open, not wide, just enough to suggest it had always been that way. Inside was darkness without depth, not empty, unconfirmed. I stepped forward slightly. The door closed instantly. No sound, just completion. I froze. Behind me, the corridor remained unchanged, but I could feel the door behind my thoughts now, not behind my body, waiting for when I stopped verifying it. I did not look again, and somewhere behind that decision, the door opened again. Night did not fall in the inn. It arrived like a weight settling into structure. When silence spread across the halls, the building changed, not visibly at first, audibly, a slow expansion, then contraction, like something enormous was breathing underneath every floor. I lay awake in room 18, listening without wanting to. The floorboards beneath me shifted slightly, not breaking, responding. A deep, synchronized inhale passed through the walls. Every room reacted at once. Not guests, the inn itself, breathing. I sat up slowly. The air felt thicker than before, like it had been drawn inward too deeply, then released too slowly. The lights outside the room dimmed slightly. Not power loss. Rest. A second breath followed. Stronger. The walls expanded subtly, then settled back, like ribs moving in darkness. I pressed my hand against the wall. It was warm, not heat from source, heat from presence. Something was sleeping beneath the structure, not metaphorically, not symbolically, physically, in the sense that the building had learned to move around it. Another breath, then shifted again, and for a brief moment, I was not inside a building anymore. I was inside something that was sleeping. The road back to the inn was gone, or maybe it had never been there in the first place. I stood in the lobby again, without remembering how I returned. The clerk was still behind the counter, still unchanged, but the air felt familiar, in a way that no longer felt comforting. It felt rehearsed, like this moment had happened too many times to still be considered new. The guest book lay open on the counter. My name was already there. Again, the same entry. Slightly different ink. Slightly different certainty. I looked up. The mirrors showed me standing in different places at once. Not reflections. Versions. The shadow figure stood behind me in all of them. Closer each time. The clerk finally spoke. Not to me. Around me. You arrived early again. Again. The word did not feel like repetition. It felt like recognition of pattern. The exit doors were visible now, but I did not remember them being there before. Or after. The road beyond them showed nothing stable. Just looping fog. Like direction had given up trying to be linear. I stepped forward. The lobby did not stop me, but it did not confirm me either. The clerk's reflection finally blinked. Once, then looked at me directly. Not kindly, not hostile, accurately. And in that moment, I understood something without hearing it. I was not checking it anymore. I was continuing. The inn had already decided I never left the first night. And now, it was only adjusting how long I would remember trying to.